Shadows of doubt. The sun hung low over the city, casting elongated shadows that danced across the asphalt. Officer Connor sat behind the wheel of their patrol car, eyes narrowed and focused, an unyielding scowl etched on his face. He had seen many things during his years on the force, and he felt a familiar anger bubbling up inside him. Can you believe they put one of them in charge? He spat, his knuckles turning white, as he gripped the steering wheel. The city had undergone significant changes recently. New leadership at the police department, a new captain with a reputation that had some officers on edge. Lenny, Connor's rookie partner, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He had only been on the force for a few months, and every day presented a new learning curve. But as Connor continued to voice his frustrations, Lenny couldn't help but feel increasingly uneasy. Maybe we should give the new captain a chance, he suggested cautiously, hoping to steer the conversation into calmer waters. Connor shot him a look that could freeze fire. You're too naive, kid, he growled. They're all the same. You can't trust any of them. The bitterness in his tone was palpable, filling the cramped space of the patrol car. Lenny's heart raced as he wrestled with Connor's words. He had always been taught to judge people based on their character, rather than their background or the color of their skin. His mother, a social worker, had instilled in him the value of compassion and understanding. But as he sat there, watching Connor's expression twist with contempt, doubt crept in. As they drove through the heart of the city, the air grew thick with tension. Each intersection they passed was a reminder of the challenges that lay ahead, not just for them as officers, but for the community they were meant to serve. Lenny glanced out the window, trying to find something to ease the growing anxiety in his stomach. Look at that car, Connor muttered, his gaze locking onto a sleek black sedan that glided smoothly along the road. Bet he stole it. Lenny frowned, instinctively defending the driver, a well-dressed black man who was obeying every traffic law. Sir, he's not doing anything wrong, he said softly. Is that what you think? Connor snapped, flipping on the patrol car's lights without another thought. Time for a little routine check. A sense of dread washed over Lenny. He wanted to voice his concerns, to stand up against what he felt was blatant racism, but the words caught in his throat. He knew he had to follow orders, but deep down, he felt something was off. As the black sedan smoothly pulled over, Lenny could see the driver's shoulders tense. The man's hands gripped the steering wheel, and Lenny sensed an underlying fear that mirrored his own discomfort. Connor stepped out of the patrol car with an air of confidence that made Lenny's stomach twist further. Sir, please, Lenny pleaded, barely able to keep his voice steady. This doesn't feel right. Ignoring him, Connor strode toward the sedan. A smug grin plastered across his face. Lenny's instincts screamed at him to intervene, to stop his partner from escalating the situation. He reluctantly followed, his heart pounding in his chest as they approached the vehicle. License and registration, Connor demanded, his tone authoritative and laced with impatience. The driver, his expression a mix of concern and confusion, slowly reached for his glove compartment. Of course, officer, he replied, his voice calm but tinged with apprehension. Lenny watched the interaction unfold, a growing pit of unease forming in his gut. He could see the driver's hands shaking slightly as he fumbled for the requested documents. A part of Lenny wanted to step in, to diffuse the tension, but he felt paralyzed by the authority of his partner. As the man produced his license and registration, Connor examined them with a scrutinizing gaze, clearly unimpressed. You know why I stopped you? No, sir, the driver replied, his voice steady despite the circumstances. I was just following the traffic laws. That's the problem, Connor muttered under his breath, the disdain evident in his tone. Lenny shifted uncomfortably, his heart racing. He felt an overwhelming urge to speak up, to defend the driver, but fear of retribution held him back. He watched as Connor leaned in closer, his demeanor aggressive and confrontational. Where did you get this car? Connor demanded, eyes narrowing. You don't look like someone who can afford a vehicle like this." Lenny's breath caught in his throat as he realized the extent of Connor's prejudice. The driver's expression shifted, a flicker of anger flashing in his eyes. "I worked hard for this car, officer," he said firmly. "I earned every penny." Connor laughed, a harsh, derisive sound that cut through the tension. "Yeah, and I suppose you think that makes you special." Lenny felt his heart sink. He couldn't let this continue, but how could he challenge a senior officer without facing the consequences? "Connor, let's just let him go." Lenny finally spoke up, his voice trembling slightly. "He's not doing anything wrong." Connor shot him a furious glare, and Lenny knew he had crossed a line, but he couldn't stand by and watch as his partner's biases tainted their role as officers of the law. "Stay out of this, rookie," Connor barked, his attention still focused on the driver. "I'm handling it." The driver's eyes darted between the two officers, confusion evident on his face. "Is there a problem, officer?" Lenny took a deep breath, trying to find the courage to stand his ground. "No, sir. There's no problem," he said, hoping to defuse the situation. "We just need to get back to our patrol." Connor's expression darkened, and Lenny could sense the tension radiating off him. "You don't get to decide what's a problem here," he snapped. "I'm the one in charge." Suddenly, the sound of a voice crackled over the radio in their patrol car, breaking the stifling silence. "Unit 12, we have a report of a disturbance at the corner of Maple and 5th. Please respond." Connor hesitated for a moment, torn between his pride and the call for backup. Lenny seized the opportunity. "Let's go, Connor. We have a job to do." The driver, still holding his license and registration, looked at Lenny with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. "Thank you," he mouthed silently, his expression filled with a sense of relief. Connor clenched his jaw, but Lenny could see the defeat in his eyes. With a final glare at the driver, Connor turned back to the patrol car. "Fine," he muttered, stalking away. As Lenny followed, he couldn't shake the feeling of shame that settled in his chest. He had stood up against his partner, but at what cost? What would this mean for their working relationship? Once inside the patrol car, Connor slammed the door shut, the anger radiating off him like heat from a flame. "You don't know how to do your job, rookie," he growled, his voice low and dangerous. "I was trying to do the right thing," Lenny replied, his voice steadier than he felt. "We can't treat people like that." "Watch yourself," Connor shot back, his tone warning. "You might not last long if you keep getting involved in things that don't concern you." Lenny took a deep breath, determination solidifying within him. He wasn't going to let fear dictate his actions. He had joined the police force to serve and protect, not to perpetuate the biases that plagued society. As they drove away, Lenny made a silent promise to himself. He would not turn a blind eye again. The turning point. The patrol car rolled through the streets of the city, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Connor drove in silence, the only sound being the faint hum of the engine and the crackling radio chatter that echoed in the background. Lenny stared out the window, his thoughts a chaotic whirlpool of frustration and determination. He replayed the earlier confrontation in his mind, the disgust he felt at Connor's blatant racism lingering like a bad taste in his mouth. It wasn't just the driver's unease that bothered him. It was Connor's unwillingness to see people as individuals. As they passed through downtown, Lenny's eyes caught a glimpse of a mural on the side of a building. It was a vibrant painting, depicting a diverse group of people coming together, hands joined in solidarity. The colors danced under the sun, a stark contrast to the negativity that surrounded him. Lenny felt a flicker of hope, a reminder that change was possible. But how could he foster that change within the very department he worked for? "Lenny, stop daydreaming," Connor barked, interrupting his thoughts. "We're supposed to be on patrol, not sightseeing." "Sorry, sir," Lenny replied, forcing himself to focus. "I was just thinking about the neighborhood. There's a lot of good happening here and—" "Good," Connor scoffed, cutting him off. "You mean crime and poverty. You think any of that art is going to change anything? This place is a cesspool. Lenny bristled at Connor's words, but took a deep breath to steady himself. But there are people trying to make a difference, he countered. We should be supporting them, not dismissing them. Connor glared at him, but before he could respond, the radio crackled to life again. Unit 12, we have reports of a fight at the corner of Maple and 5th. Please respond. Connor's expression shifted, and Lenny felt a rush of adrenaline. This was a chance to put their differences aside, to focus on their duty. Let's go, sir, he urged, his heart racing at the thought of intervening in a real situation. They sped toward the location, sirens wailing, and Lenny's mind raced with possibilities. He envisioned a chaotic scene, fists flying and tempers flaring. As they turned onto Maple Street, the unmistakable sounds of shouting and crashing echoed through the air. Pulling up to the scene, they saw a small crowd gathered, voices raised in anger. 2 men were in the center, shoving each other with escalating aggression. Lenny felt a rush of responsibility wash over him. This was why he became a cop, to protect, to mediate, to help. Stay behind me, rookie, Connor ordered as he stepped out of the patrol car, the hardened facade back in place. Lenny nodded, but as he stepped out, he felt an overwhelming urge to take charge. He couldn't let Connor's attitude dictate their response to this situation. Sir, maybe we should approach this together, Lenny suggested, trying to keep his voice calm. Connor shot him a glare, but the urgency of the moment seemed to temper his irritation. Fine, but don't make me look bad, he muttered, moving toward the crowd. As they approached, Lenny could see the 2 men were clearly heated, their faces flushed with anger. He noticed a woman standing nearby, clearly upset, her eyes darting between the fighters and the crowd. Hey, everyone, back off, Connor barked, striding into the fray. Lenny followed closely, feeling the tension in the air thicken. Lenny took a deep breath and called out to the fighters. Gentlemen, let's calm down and talk this out, he said, his voice steady and authoritative. No one needs to get hurt. One of the men paused, his fists clenching and unclenching as he stared at Lenny. What do you know, cop? You don't understand what it's like. I may not know your story, but I want to help, Lenny replied, his heart racing. We're here to listen. Can you tell us what's going on? Connor, however, was not as patient. Stop wasting time. Break it up, he shouted, pushing his way between the 2 men. Lenny watched in frustration as Connor's aggressive approach only fueled the tension further. Step back, officer, the other man said, his voice low and dangerous. You don't know anything about us. Lenny took a step forward, trying to interject. Let's just talk. No one needs to go to jail today. But Connor seemed oblivious to Lenny's attempt to mediate. You think you can talk your way out of this? You're just another punk causing trouble, he barked, turning his back on Lenny. Lenny's heart sank as he watched the scene unfold. The man Connor had confronted shifted his weight, a dangerous glint in his eye. Lenny could sense the escalating tension, and he had to act. Connor, we need to back off, he said firmly, placing a hand on Connor's arm to prevent him from moving closer to the men. We need to de-escalate, not escalate. Don't touch me, Connor snapped, shrugging off Lenny's hand. You're making a mistake. But Lenny could feel the atmosphere shifting, the palpable anger of the crowd rising. Sir, we can't force them apart. Let's just give them space. The other man looked at Lenny, confusion mingled with anger. Why are you siding with him? He demanded, gesturing at Connor. He's just going to make things worse. I'm trying to help, Lenny said, raising his hands in a placating gesture. Let's not turn this into something bigger than it has to be. We can talk it out. Suddenly, the fight erupted again, fists flying as the 2 men engaged in a fierce struggle. Lenny's heart raced as he witnessed the chaos unfolding before him. Stop it! Stop it! Lenny shouted, his voice rising above the chaos. He stepped forward, moving closer to the fighters. We can't do this. You'll both get hurt. In that moment, Lenny felt a shift within himself. He wasn't just a rookie officer. He was a mediator, someone who could bridge the gap between chaos and resolution. The other man paused, his breath coming in heavy gasps. "Why should we listen to you?" He snarled, but Lenny could see a flicker of doubt in his eyes. "Because I care," Lenny replied, his voice steady. "I care about you both and this community. Let's find a better way to handle this." Before he could react, Connor lunged forward, grabbing one of the fighters by the collar and shoving him back. "You think you can just threaten my authority?" Connor yelled, his anger boiling over. Lenny's heart sank. "Connor, no," he shouted, stepping between them. But it was too late. The crowd surged forward, voices rising in confusion and anger. Lenny felt the chaos envelop him, the intensity of the moment surging through his veins. "Everyone, back off," Lenny shouted, raising his voice to command attention. "This isn't how we resolve our problems. We need to listen and communicate." Just then, the woman Lenny had noticed earlier stepped forward. "He's right. We can't let anger control us," she said, her voice clear and strong. As the crowd began to quiet down, Lenny felt a surge of hope. This was his chance to make a difference, to stand up for what was right. "Let's talk," Lenny urged, turning to the men who had been fighting. "We can't let our frustrations turn into violence. We need to find common ground." Slowly, the tension began to dissipate. The fighters, still breathing heavily, exchanged uncertain glances. The crowd fell silent, their eyes locked on Lenny. "Tell us what's bothering you," Lenny continued, his voice steady. "Let's find a way to resolve this without violence." Connor stood back, watching Lenny's transformation with a mix of disbelief and frustration. "What are you doing?" he muttered under his breath, clearly at a loss for how to respond. But Lenny didn't waver. He kept his gaze focused on the men, encouraging them to speak. "It's okay. We're here to listen. You have a right to be heard." After a tense moment, the first man spoke up. "I was just trying to defend my brother," he said, his voice shaking with emotion. "These guys were talking trash about him." Lenny nodded, absorbing the words. "I understand. You're looking out for your family. But we need to find better ways to protect each other. Violence isn't the answer." The second man, still simmering but calmer now, added, "I didn't want to fight. I just lost my job, and I'm frustrated. Everything's been piling up." "I get it," Lenny replied, empathy washing over him. "Life can be overwhelming, but we can work together to find solutions. We don't need to fight." As the words hung in the air, Lenny felt the crowd shift, their anger transforming into understanding. The atmosphere lightened, the heavy tension dissipating as they began to engage in conversation. Connor stood by, disbelief etched on his face. He couldn't fathom how Lenny had turned the tide. As the discussion progressed, Lenny facilitated the dialogue, asking questions, allowing the fighters to express their frustrations, and gently guiding them toward resolution. The crowd began to cheer, their voices echoing with encouragement. Lenny felt a surge of pride swell within him. This was what policing was about: community, understanding, and compassion. After a while, the two men shook hands, a tentative peace forming between them. The crowd erupted in applause, and Lenny felt a warm glow of accomplishment wash over him. "Good job, rookie," Connor said begrudgingly, his tone surprisingly softer. "I didn't think you could pull that off." Lenny smiled, his heart racing with exhilaration. "Thanks, sir. We just need to remember that everyone deserves respect, no matter their circumstances." As they walked back to their patrol car, Lenny couldn't help but feel a sense of purpose blooming within him. He had made a difference today, and if he could do it once, he could do it again. The drive back to the station was quieter, and Lenny reflected on the day's events. He knew there would be more challenges ahead, but he was ready. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the city, Lenny felt a renewed sense of determination. He was not just a rookie cop. He was a beacon of hope, ready to challenge the norms and fight for justice in a world that often seemed unjust. He knew he would have to confront Connor's attitudes again, but he was no longer afraid. He would stand up for what was right, even if it meant standing alone. "Let's go get some coffee," he said, breaking the silence. "I think we could both use a break." "Sure, rookie," Connor replied, a hint of respect in his tone. "Maybe you're not such a waste of space after all." Lenny chuckled, feeling a sense of camaraderie with his partner, even if it was fragile. "Thanks, Stir. I appreciate that." As they headed to the cafe, Lenny felt the weight of the day lift off his shoulders. He was ready for whatever challenges awaited him next, confident that he could make a difference in his community, one small step at a time. In that moment, he understood that even the smallest actions could lead to profound changes, and he was determined to be part of that transformation. The night was still young, and so was his mission. Lenny was ready to face the world, knowing that together, they could build a better tomorrow. The unraveling. As the days turned into weeks, Lenny found himself entrenched in a whirlwind of experiences that tested both his resolve and his character. The tension between him and Connor simmered beneath the surface, occasionally bubbling over in confrontations that echoed the struggles he had faced on the streets. Each day, Lenny tried to hold on to the hope that their partnership could evolve, that he could make a meaningful impact not only within the community, but also within the walls of the police department. It was a Monday morning when the news broke. Lenny sat at his desk, reviewing reports, the hum of the precinct busy with officers coming and going, phones ringing, and the constant chatter of voices filling the air. His morning routine had become a ritual of sorts, a comforting structure that helped ground him amidst the chaos. Then the radio crackled to life, cutting through the noise. "Attention, all units. We have reports of a shooting at the corner of 8th and Elm. Please respond. Multiple victims. I repeat, multiple victims." Lenny's heart raced as he grabbed his gear. The weight of his badge felt heavier today, a stark reminder of the responsibility he carried. Connor was already moving, barking orders as he prepared to head out. "Let's go, rookie. This isn't a drill." They jumped into the patrol car, the sirens blaring as they sped toward the scene. Lenny's mind raced with questions. What had happened? Who was involved? He tried to prepare himself mentally for whatever awaited them. As they arrived at the chaotic scene, Lenny's stomach twisted. The sight before him was surreal. Police cars lined the street, their lights flashing red and blue, illuminating the panicked faces of onlookers. Lenny could hear distant cries and the wailing of ambulances approaching. They parked, and Lenny rushed out of the car, adrenaline coursing through his veins. Connor took the lead, pushing past the crowd, his demeanor as aggressive as ever. Lenny followed closely, aware that his partner's approach could escalate the situation further. As they reached the perimeter, Lenny saw a group of young men standing together, their faces etched with shock and fear. He felt an overwhelming urge to step forward, to engage with them. But Connor pushed him aside, moving to establish control. "Get back. This is a police matter." Connor barked at the crowd, his voice harsh and authoritative. Lenny cringed at the way Connor was handling the situation. He understood the need for order, but he also felt the pressing importance of connection and compassion in moments like these. "Connor, maybe we should." Lenny started, but Connor cut him off. "Shut it, rookie. You don't know what you're talking about," he snapped, eyes scanning the scene for potential threats. Lenny could see that one of the young men had begun to cry, his body trembling. I don't know what to do," the boy muttered, his voice barely audible above the noise. Lenny stepped forward, leaving Connor behind. "Hey, man, I'm Officer Lenny. Can I help you?" The boy looked up, tears streaming down his face. "My brother, he was shot. He was just trying to break up a fight." Lenny felt a pang of anguish in his chest. "I'm so sorry. We're going to do everything we can to help. Can you tell me where he is?" "He's over there. The boy pointed frantically toward a cluster of people gathered near an ambulance, and Lenny's heart sank as he saw the stretcher being wheeled away. "Stay here," Lenny instructed the boy gently, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "I'll be right back." With a sense of urgency, Lenny rushed toward the ambulance, his heart racing with every step. The crowd pressed in, a mass of anxiety and grief. He spotted the paramedics working feverishly, their voices raised in frantic coordination. "Please, let me through," Lenny called out, pushing his way to the front. He needed to know if the boy's brother was okay. As he approached, he heard the paramedic calling for more supplies, the panic in their voices unmistakable. "We need to stabilize him. Get the defibrillator." Lenny's breath hitched in his throat. The gravity of the situation hit him like a punch to the gut. This was real. This was what he had signed up for, to be the one who could make a difference, to save lives when it mattered most. Suddenly, he caught a glimpse of the young man on the stretcher, blood soaking through his shirt. "Please, just hold on," Lenny whispered, his heart racing. The paramedics worked quickly, their movements precise but urgent. "We need to get him to the hospital now," one of them shouted. Lenny stepped back, allowing them space as they loaded the stretcher into the ambulance. He felt helpless, a knot tightening in his chest as he turned back to the boy who had been waiting anxiously. "Did they get him?" the boy asked, eyes wide with fear. "They're doing everything they can," Lenny replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "Can you tell me your name?" "Jamal," he replied, his voice trembling. "My brother's name is Malik. He didn't do anything wrong." "I know, Jamal. We're going to find out what happened here," Lenny promised, feeling the weight of the boy's pain. "You're not alone in this." Connor rejoined them, his expression dark. "What are you doing, rookie?" "We need to secure the area and start questioning witnesses." "But Connor, this is about more than just securing the scene." Lenny shot back, feeling frustration boil over. "We can't just treat people like numbers in a report. They need compassion right now." Connor's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening. "This isn't a therapy session, Lenny. We have a job to do, and we're losing time." Lenny took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay calm. "I get that, but we can't ignore the humanity in this. Jamal deserves to know that someone cares." As the argument hung in the air, a familiar voice broke through the tension. "Lenny." Lenny turned to see Officer Wilson, a veteran officer known for his level-headedness. "You need to get the statement from the witnesses and the victim's brother. I'll handle securing the area," Wilson said, his tone firm but gentle. "Thanks, Officer Wilson," Lenny said gratefully, relieved to have some backup. "Jamal," Lenny said softly, turning back to the boy. "I need you to stay close to me, okay? I'm going to help you find out what happened to Malik." Jamal nodded, his expression still clouded with fear, but now tinged with a glimmer of hope. As they moved to a quieter area away from the chaos, Lenny focused on creating a safe space for Jamal. He could see the boy's hands shaking, the trauma of the day evident in his eyes. "Do you want to tell me what you saw?" Lenny asked gently, his voice a calming presence amidst the storm. "I was just standing there, and then I heard the shots," Jamal began, his voice shaking. "I didn't know what to do. I was scared." "It's okay to be scared," Lenny reassured him, nodding. "You're brave for talking about it. Can you remember anything else? Anything that might help us?" Jamal took a shaky breath, his eyes glazing over with memory. "There were two guys fighting, and then Malik tried to stop them. He was just trying to help." Lenny's heart ached for the boy. "He sounds like a good brother. Did you see what happened next?" "They started shooting," Jamal whispered, tears brimming in his eyes. "I didn't want him to get hurt. He was just trying to help." "I believe you, Jamal," Lenny said, his heart heavy with the weight of the boy's words. "And we're going to make sure that this doesn't go unanswered." As they spoke, Lenny felt a sense of purpose igniting within him. This was why he became a police officer, to be a voice for the voiceless, to ensure that justice was served. "Stay close to me," Lenny urged. "I'll protect you." They returned to the main scene, where Officer Wilson was already talking to witnesses. Lenny felt a renewed sense of determination wash over him as he joined the group, ready to gather information and make sense of the chaos. Hours passed as they pieced together the story from various witnesses. Lenny found himself feeling the weight of each account, the pain of the community pressing down on him like a heavy blanket. This was not just a job. It was a responsibility to protect and serve those who needed it most. In the midst of the chaos, Lenny caught sight of Connor again. The older officer was on the phone, his expression tense as he relayed information back to dispatch. Lenny approached, noticing the tension etched into Connor's features. "Sir, I think we have enough statements to build a clearer picture of what happened," Lenny offered, trying to keep the tone positive. Connor glanced at him, his eyes narrowing. "And what about that kid? You think he's reliable?" Lenny bristled at the question. He just witnessed his brother getting shot. "Of course, he's reliable." "He's terrified, Connor. We need to be there for him." Connor huffed, his frustration evident. "You're too soft, rookie. This is a tough world out there. You can't just coddle everyone." "Being tough doesn't mean being heartless," Lenny shot back, refusing to back down. "We can enforce the law and still show compassion. They're not mutually exclusive." Connor's expression darkened, but before he could respond, a shout rang out. "Officer, over here." Lenny turned, his attention drawn to a group of people who had just emerged from an alley, looking frantic and frightened. "Something's going on. You need to come," one of them shouted, waving their arms. Lenny exchanged a glance with Connor, and without hesitation, they rushed toward the commotion. The crowd parted as they made their way through, the atmosphere thick with anxiety. "What's happening?" Lenny asked as they approached. "We saw who did it. The guys who were fighting. They ran this way." "Did you get a look at them?" Connor demanded, his authority commanding their attention. "They were wearing hoodies, but one of them had a tattoo." One of the witnesses replied, his voice trembling. "It was a snake or something." Lenny's heart raced. This was the lead they needed. "Can you remember anything else?" "There was a blue car parked nearby." Another witness chimed in. "They jumped in and took off." Lenny turned to Connor, excitement coursing through him. "We need to get a description of that car. It could be our best chance to catch them." Connor nodded, his expression shifting from frustration to focus. "All right, let's spread out and see if we can get more information." As they moved through the crowd, Lenny felt a surge of adrenaline. This was what he had signed up for, to fight for justice, to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. They spent the next several hours canvassing the area, gathering information and interviewing witnesses. Lenny's determination grew stronger with each conversation, his passion for the job igniting a fire within him. Finally, as the sun began to set, they received a call over the radio. "Attention all units, we have a possible sighting of the suspects in a blue sedan heading west on 12th Street. Lenny's heart raced as they jumped back into the patrol car. "Let's go, Connor. This could be it." As they sped toward the location, Lenny felt a sense of purpose wash over him. This was why he became a police officer, to make a difference, to stand up for the people in his community. As they arrived at the scene, Lenny's pulse quickened. The blue sedan was parked on the side of the road, its engine still warm. "Get ready," Connor ordered, his voice low and tense. "We need to approach carefully." Lenny nodded, adrenaline coursing through his veins as they approached the vehicle. "On my count, we go in," Connor said, his voice steady. 1, 2, 3. They moved in unison, Lenny feeling the weight of his badge and the responsibility it represented. "Police, hands in the air," Connor shouted, his voice booming. The suspects inside the car froze, their expressions shifting from shock to panic. Lenny's heart raced as he watched the scene unfold, the tension thickening the air. This was it. This was what he had been fighting for. But as they arrested the suspects and cuffed them, Lenny couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The real work lay ahead, navigating the complex web of justice, healing, and community. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the city, Lenny realized he was not just a rookie cop anymore. He was part of something bigger, a movement toward understanding, compassion, and change. And no matter how tough it got, he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Shadows of change. The blue sedan was pulled over, its occupants apprehended and cuffed. Lenny felt a rush of adrenaline as he watched the officers escort the suspects to the squad car. But amid the exhilaration, a heavy weight settled in his chest. These were young men, just kids, really caught in a cycle he had seen too many times. "Good work, rookie," Connor said, clapping Lenny on the shoulder. "You've got a good instinct for this." Lenny nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. He felt a deep empathy for the suspects. They were products of their environment, shaped by circumstances beyond their control. The thrill of the arrest began to fade as he contemplated what their futures might hold. After the suspects were secured, Lenny turned to Connor. "What's next?" Connor glanced at the arrested boys, his expression hardening. "Now we bring them in, file the reports, and let the legal system take over. They'll face the consequences of their actions." "But that doesn't really help them, does it?" Lenny shot back, his voice rising with passion. "We can arrest them all we want, but if we don't address the root issues, we're just spinning our wheels." Connor's brow furrowed. "And what do you propose we do? Hand out therapy sessions and hugs?" "This isn't a charity. It's law enforcement. It's not just about enforcing the law, Connor. It's about understanding the people we're dealing with. There's a reason they resort to crime. We can be tough on crime while also being tough on the causes of crime," Lenny insisted. Connor looked at him skeptically but didn't respond. Lenny took a deep breath, frustrated. He knew he had to find a way to bridge the gap between the badge he wore and the compassion he felt. As they drove back to the precinct, Lenny felt an urgent desire to find a way to make a difference. His phone buzzed, interrupting his thoughts. It was a text from his partner, Sarah, asking him to meet her at the community center later that evening. "Hey, I have to stop by the community center. Want to join?" Lenny asked Connor as he parked the patrol car. Connor shrugged. "I have paperwork to do. Good luck with your little community outreach thing." Lenny rolled his eyes, the irritation bubbling up inside him. "It's not just a thing, Connor. It's an opportunity to connect with the community and understand their challenges. You might learn something." With that, Lenny exited the car and headed to the community center, determined to pursue his vision of change. The community center buzzed with activity when Lenny arrived. Children played in one area while adults mingled in another, laughter and chatter filling the air. He spotted Sarah in the corner, organizing a food drive. "Lenny, I'm glad you could make it," she exclaimed, her smile infectious. "What's going on?" he asked, taking a moment to survey the scene. "We're gathering donations for families in need," she explained. "It's our way of giving back to the community." Lenny felt a swell of pride. "This is fantastic. Do you think we could expand it? Maybe offer some resources for education and job training?" Sarah's eyes lit up. "That's a great idea. We can reach out to local businesses and see if they'd be willing to sponsor workshops or mentorship programs." As they brainstormed, Lenny felt hope wash over him. He realized that while the police had a crucial role in maintaining order, the community's involvement was equally important. He had the power to help create change beyond the badge, and he was determined to seize that opportunity. Before long, Lenny found himself surrounded by a group of children who had taken an interest in him. They were curious about his uniform, asking him questions about being a police officer. "What do you do?" one little girl asked, her wide eyes filled with wonder. Lenny knelt to her level. "I help keep the community safe, but I also want to make sure everyone feels heard and understood." "Do you catch bad guys?" A boy chimed in, his enthusiasm contagious. Lenny chuckled. Sometimes, but it's more important to help people before they become bad guys. I want to find ways to support them. The children listened intently, and Lenny felt the warmth in his heart. He knew that if he could instill the right values in them now, they might avoid the pitfalls that had ensnared so many others in the community. Just then, an elderly woman approached, her cane tapping softly against the floor. "Officer," she said, her voice quivering but firm, "thank you for being here. We need more good people like you in our neighborhood." Lenny smiled at her, touched by her words. "Thank you, ma'am. It's my duty to serve and protect, but I can't do it alone. I need your help, too." "Of course, we all have a role to play," she replied, her eyes shining with resolve. As the night wore on, Lenny felt a profound connection to the community. He spent time talking to the elderly, playing games with the children, and listening to the stories of the families who had lived there for generations. Each conversation painted a richer picture of the struggles and triumphs they faced daily. When he finally left the community center, Lenny felt invigorated. He realized he had a unique position to facilitate change, not just as a police officer, but as a member of the community. As he walked to his car, his phone buzzed again. It was a message from Connor. "Hope you're not getting too soft out there. Remember, it's a tough world." Lenny smiled at the text, but he couldn't help but think of how much Connor was missing. He believed that the most significant changes would come from understanding and compassion, not just strict enforcement of the law. He started the car, determination flooding through him. Lenny knew he would continue to stand at the intersection of law enforcement and community engagement. It wouldn't be easy, and not everyone would support his vision, but he was willing to fight for it. The world may have been tough, but Lenny was ready to face it, armed not just with his badge, but with the understanding that true change begins with compassion and a commitment to lifting others up. The journey ahead would be challenging, but he had faith that he could make a difference, one step at a time. As he drove through the streets, illuminated by the glow of streetlights, Lenny felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was only the beginning, and he was ready to embrace the challenge. A test of faith. The following weeks were a whirlwind for Lenny. He dedicated himself to expanding the community outreach program, organizing workshops, and collaborating with local businesses to offer mentorship for the youth. His efforts slowly gained traction. Families began to show up, eager to participate, while word spread throughout the neighborhood. One afternoon, as Lenny was reviewing the community center schedule, he received a call from Connor. "Hey, rookie," Connor's voice boomed over the phone. "I hear you've been playing community organizer lately." Lenny chuckled lightly, sensing a hint of sarcasm in Connor's tone. "Just trying to make a difference, Connor. We're hosting a workshop on conflict resolution next week." "A workshop, huh? You really think talking things out will change anything?" Connor scoffed. "Why not? Sometimes people just need to feel heard. You might be surprised how effective communication can be," Lenny countered, a mixture of excitement and frustration bubbling inside him. "Good luck with that," Connor replied, his tone flat. "Just remember, the streets are still dangerous. You can't talk your way out of everything." "Maybe not, but it's a start," Lenny retorted, feeling a familiar tension building. "Maybe if we understood the community better, we could prevent some of that danger." "Just don't get too soft out there, rookie," Connor said, and hung up. Lenny sighed, putting down the phone. It was disheartening to see his partners so dismissive of the very community they served. But he couldn't let that discourage him. There was work to be done. As the workshop approached, Lenny felt a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. He had invited a diverse group of speakers, including local leaders and community activists, to share their insights and experiences. He wanted to create a space where dialogue could flourish, where residents felt safe expressing their concerns and aspirations. On the day of the workshop, the community center was buzzing with activity. Lenny arrived early to set up the room, arranging chairs in a circle to foster a sense of openness. He felt a surge of hope as families began to trickle in, their expressions a mix of curiosity and skepticism. As the workshop commenced, Lenny introduced the speakers, each bringing a unique perspective. One by one, they shared their stories, highlighting issues ranging from poverty and education to systemic racism and community violence. Lenny felt the energy in the room shift. Walls of distrust began to crack as attendees engaged in discussion. "Why should we trust the police?" one woman asked, her voice firm yet trembling. "We've seen too many instances of brutality. How can we be sure you won't just label us as criminals?" The room fell silent, the weight of her question hanging heavily in the air. Lenny took a deep breath, knowing this moment was crucial. "I understand your concerns, and they are valid. I'm here not just as an officer, but as a neighbor. My goal is to create a bridge between the community and the police. I want to listen to your experiences and learn how we can better serve you." As the conversation progressed, Lenny felt a sense of urgency grow within him. He wanted to convey that he wasn't just part of the badge, but also a representative of the community's hopes and struggles. However, midway through the workshop, just as the atmosphere began to lighten, a loud crash erupted from outside. The sound sent a ripple of fear through the crowd, and conversations abruptly ceased. Lenny's heart raced. "Stay here," he instructed the group, his voice steady. He dashed toward the door, feeling adrenaline surge through him. As he stepped outside, he saw a chaotic scene unfold. A group of teenagers had gathered in the street, shouting and pushing each other, a fight breaking out. Lenny's instincts kicked in. He had to de-escalate the situation before it spiraled out of control. "Hey, stop," he yelled, rushing toward the group. "Break it up. Let's talk this through." But the teenagers didn't listen. Their anger was palpable, their frustration spilling over. Lenny felt a familiar frustration build inside him. This was precisely what they had been discussing in the workshop: communication and understanding. Yet here was an explosive situation unfolding right before him. Before he could reach the group, Connor's patrol car screeched to a halt. The moment he stepped out, the atmosphere shifted. Connor's presence felt heavy, and the energy in the crowd shifted from chaos to apprehension. "Step aside, rookie," Connor ordered, his voice commanding. "I'll handle this." Lenny hesitated but knew Connor had the authority. "Connor, wait. We need to talk to them, not just shut it down. We can't intimidate them." Connor shot him a glare, clearly unimpressed. "And what's your plan, Lenny? Stand around and have a chat. They need to understand there are consequences." Lenny felt his frustration boil over. "It's not just about consequences, Connor. It's about finding out why they're angry in the first place." But before he could continue, a loud shout pierced the air. A rock flew from the crowd, narrowly missing Lenny, who instinctively ducked. The scene devolved further, and Lenny felt a surge of fear mixed with anger. Connor drew his weapon, and Lenny felt his heart drop. "Connor, no," he shouted, but it was too late. "Everyone, back up," Connor yelled, his voice booming over the chaos. The crowd began to disperse, fear flickering across their faces. "Get control, rookie," Connor barked as he moved toward the crowd, shoving a few teenagers aside. Lenny's stomach twisted as he watched the situation spiral out of control. Desperate, he pushed through the crowd. "Wait, we don't need to escalate this." But Connor wasn't listening. His heavy-handed approach only intensified the tension, and Lenny realized that Connor's actions were jeopardizing everything they had worked for. In a moment of clarity, Lenny stepped in front of Connor, blocking his path. "We need to stop. This isn't how we change things." Connor stared at him, incredulous. "What are you doing? Get out of the way." "No, if you keep going like this, we'll lose their trust for good," Lenny replied, his voice steady but filled with urgency. For a moment, it felt like time had frozen. The shouting faded into the background as Lenny locked eyes with Connor, pleading for him to understand. Finally, Connor lowered his weapon, the tension in his shoulders easing just a fraction. Fine, he grumbled, stepping back. Lenny seized the opportunity, turning to the crowd. Listen up. We're here to help, not to hurt. Let's talk about what's really going on. Gradually, the crowd quieted, the anger simmering down as Lenny spoke. He focused on the importance of dialogue and healing, determined to show them that he was not just an officer, but a partner in their struggles. As the atmosphere began to shift once more, Lenny realized that this moment was more than just a confrontation. It was a turning point. He knew it would take time to build trust, but today was a step in the right direction. After a tense but productive conversation, the crowd began to disperse. Lenny felt exhausted but triumphant. The clash that had almost turned violent had transformed into a moment of understanding. As he turned to Connor, he found his partner still standing by the patrol car, arms crossed and jaw clenched. "You really think you made a difference?" he scoffed, the skepticism evident in his voice. "Maybe not today, but it's a start," Lenny replied, refusing to back down. "We can't be afraid to show compassion, Connor. It's what makes us human." Connor stared at him for a moment, the tension between them palpable. "Just remember, the streets are still dangerous," he muttered, walking away. As Lenny watched Connor retreat, he felt a mix of disappointment and determination. He knew it wouldn't be easy to change attitudes within the department, especially among those set in their ways, but he also felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was about more than just policing. It was about building relationships, fostering understanding, and working toward a future where community and law enforcement could coexist in harmony. Lenny took a deep breath, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The road would be long, but with each step forward, he felt the shadows of doubt begin to fade, replaced by the light of hope. The fight for change was far from over, but Lenny was willing to take that journey, one conversation at a time. The road ahead. The aftermath of the workshop incident weighed heavily on Lenny's mind. The incident had been a turning point, not just for him, but for the entire precinct. He knew that the challenges ahead would be immense, but he also felt a renewed sense of purpose. The tension between Connor and him had shifted slightly. It was no longer a battle of defiance, but a complicated partnership rooted in a shared goal of community safety and understanding. Over the next few weeks, Lenny dedicated himself to furthering their community outreach efforts. He organized a series of workshops aimed at breaking down barriers between law enforcement and the neighborhoods they patrolled. The workshops focused on various topics, including police procedures, rights of citizens, and conflict resolution techniques. To his surprise, attendance increased with each event, with both community members and police officers eager to engage in open dialogues. Meanwhile, Connor continued to grapple with his prejudices, but Lenny noticed small changes. Connor would occasionally join Lenny during outreach events, standing at the back with his arms crossed, listening. While he often wore a skeptical expression, Lenny could sense that Connor was gradually absorbing the information and the testimonies from the community members. One afternoon, while preparing for the next workshop, Lenny received an unexpected call from his old partner, Sarah. She had been reassigned to a different precinct and was eager to catch up. They hadn't spoken since the upheaval following their last case together. "Hey, Lenny, how's the new job treating you?" Sarah asked, her voice filled with warmth. "It's going well, actually. I'm working on a community outreach program, trying to bridge the gap between the police and the community," he replied, pride swelling in his chest. "Really? That sounds promising. But knowing you, I imagine it hasn't been without its challenges," Sarah teased. Lenny chuckled. "You know me too well. I've had my share of obstacles, especially with some of my colleagues. But it feels important. I want to make a real difference." "Lenny, you've always had a heart for people. You're on the right path. Just remember to take care of yourself too, okay?" "Thanks, I will. I've got a good support system, and I'm trying to stay focused." After hanging up, Lenny felt invigorated by Sarah's encouragement. He made it a point to reach out to former colleagues and community leaders to bolster support for their outreach efforts. As the weeks turned into months, Lenny organized the community workshops more efficiently, incorporating feedback from participants. He invited guest speakers from various backgrounds, including teachers, local activists, and even former inmates who shared their experiences with the justice system. These narratives were powerful, serving as a reminder of the systemic issues that needed addressing. One day, Lenny received an email from the precinct's chief of police, requesting a meeting with him. His stomach churned with nerves as he entered the office, unsure of what to expect. "Detective Lenny, thank you for coming," the chief said, his demeanor serious but respectful. "I've been hearing some positive feedback about your community outreach program." "Thank you, sir," Lenny replied, trying to keep his tone steady. The chief leaned back in his chair. "I've also heard some concerns. It seems there's a divide within the department about your approach." Lenny's heart sank. "I understand, sir. I'm trying to change perceptions, but I know it can be difficult for some to adjust. I appreciate your initiative, Lenny, but you need to understand that not everyone is on board. Some officers believe that your approach undermines their authority," the chief stated bluntly. "I'm not trying to undermine anyone. I want to build trust," Lenny replied, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. The chief nodded. "I get that, but it may be wise to find a middle ground. You can't change the department overnight." Lenny felt a mix of disappointment and determination. "I know that, sir, but if we don't start somewhere, we'll never get anywhere. I just need the department's support to keep this initiative alive. Consider it, but know that you might face pushback along the way. I'll support you as best I can, but ultimately it's up to you to navigate these waters," the chief said, a hint of encouragement in his tone. With renewed vigor, Lenny approached Connor about collaborating on the next workshop, which was themed around police ethics and accountability. "I think it could be beneficial for both officers and the community to discuss these issues together," he proposed. Connor raised an eyebrow. "You really think they'll listen to us?" "Maybe not right away, but it's a chance to start a dialogue. Plus, having you there might encourage other officers to participate," Lenny urged. "I'll think about it," Connor replied, though Lenny could sense that he was hesitant. Days passed, and Lenny continued to promote the upcoming workshop, even reaching out to local media to highlight their initiative. He wanted to create a sense of community ownership over the event. As the workshop approached, Connor surprised Lenny by agreeing to co-host the session. "I'll be there," he said one morning, a hint of determination in his voice. "Great. We can really make an impact together," Lenny replied, thrilled at the unexpected support. The day of the workshop arrived, and the community center was abuzz with activity. Lenny could see a mix of familiar and new faces, all eager to engage in what he hoped would be a transformative conversation. Connor arrived just before the event started, looking serious but ready. Lenny could feel the tension between them, but it was different this time, more collaborative. As they began, Lenny kicked things off by introducing the theme. "Today, we're discussing police ethics and accountability, topics that matter deeply to both the community and our officers." Connor stepped forward, his presence commanding. "I know many of you have had negative experiences with law enforcement. I want to acknowledge that, and I hope we can talk openly today." To Lenny's surprise, the crowd reacted positively to Connor's candor. As the discussions unfolded, community members voiced their concerns about police practices, and Lenny facilitated the dialogue, encouraging a respectful exchange of ideas. "Why should we trust you?" one participant challenged. "How do we know things will change?" Connor responded thoughtfully. "Trust isn't given. It's earned. We have to show you that we're here to protect and serve, not to intimidate. That starts with open conversations like this." As the workshop continued, Lenny felt a sense of hope swell within him. He watched as participants began to engage with one another, community members and officers alike. The barriers slowly started to break down, replaced by understanding and shared experiences. At the end of the workshop, Lenny felt a sense of accomplishment. While they hadn't solved every issue in one afternoon, They had taken significant strides toward rebuilding trust. As people began to leave, many expressed their gratitude, and Lenny noticed Connor conversing with a few attendees, genuinely listening to their concerns. After the crowd dissipated, Lenny approached Connor, feeling buoyed by the day's success. "I think we made a difference today," he said, smiling. Connor nodded, his expression softer than before. "Yeah, maybe you were right, rookie. This isn't just about enforcing laws. It's about connecting with the community." Lenny felt a rush of encouragement at the acknowledgement. "It's a long road ahead, but this is just the beginning. We can continue these discussions regularly." Connor smirked. "I suppose I could use some practice in not being a hard-ass all the time." Lenny chuckled. "And I can help you with that. We're in this together." As they walked out of the community center side by side, Lenny felt a renewed sense of purpose. The struggles of the past had forged a bond between them, one that went beyond badge and uniform. In the weeks that followed, the momentum from the workshop continued to build. Lenny and Connor collaborated on more community events, including the Youth Sports Day that encouraged local kids to interact with officers in a positive environment. They organized safety seminars and neighborhood cleanups, slowly fostering goodwill within the community. Meanwhile, Lenny received further support from the precinct leadership. The chief acknowledged the program's impact, allocating more resources and encouraging other officers to get involved. Lenny couldn't shake the feeling that real change was on the horizon, even if it was slow. The new community-oriented approach brought an energy that Lenny had never experienced in his time on the force. One day, as Lenny was cleaning up after an event, he noticed a familiar face in the crowd. Sarah had returned. "Hey, Lenny," she called out, a bright smile lighting up her face. "I heard about everything you've been doing here. I had to see it for myself." Lenny beamed with pride, thrilled to share this moment with her. "It's been a journey, but it's starting to feel like we're making a real impact." As they chatted, Lenny could sense the weight of his experiences melting away. Sharing his triumphs with someone who understood the challenges of the job invigorated him. "Just remember, Lenny," Sarah said, her tone serious but supportive. "You can't do it alone. Lean on your community and your colleagues." "I'm learning that the hard way," Lenny admitted, reflecting on his past struggles. "But I'm committed to this path. It's not just about being a cop anymore. It's about being a part of something bigger." Sarah nodded in understanding. "That's the spirit. You're going to change lives, Lenny. Just don't forget to take care of yourself too." As Lenny stood at the forefront of the transformation within the precinct and the community, he felt a sense of belonging that he hadn't known before. The camaraderie with Connor deepened, and the bond with community members blossomed into friendships. In the months that followed, Lenny and Connor became a team, not just on duty, but in their commitment to fostering change. They worked to amplify the voices of the marginalized, advocating for policy changes, and creating a platform for open communication. Their outreach efforts became a model for other precincts, demonstrating the power of collaboration and the importance of empathy in policing. Lenny knew they were making strides, and each event brought a renewed sense of hope and possibility. With every challenge they faced, Lenny remained committed to the ideals that had guided him from the beginning: understanding, compassion, and justice. In a world often divided, he believed that through small actions they could create ripples of change, transforming not just the precinct, but the entire community. As he left the precinct one evening, Lenny paused to look back at the building that had once felt so imposing. With the sun setting behind him, he smiled, knowing that the journey was far from over. Yet for the first time in a long time, he felt optimistic about the future. Together with Connor and the community, they were rewriting the narrative, one interaction at a time, and paving the way for a brighter tomorrow. Lenny had found his purpose, and with it, a renewed sense of self. The road ahead would undoubtedly be filled with obstacles and challenges, but armed with the knowledge that he was not alone, he felt ready to face whatever came next. Each step forward was a victory, a testament to the power of change, understanding, and the belief that together they could create a better world for everyone.